Welcome once again to Digital Training Hub. If this is your first time, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications to receive alerts when new content is released. This is lesson 4 of 7 on communication skills. In this lesson, we are going to learn how to promote the use of communication strategies in communication. Learning Activities 1. Provide information to all areas of the organization to facilitate the implementation of the strategy. Special instructions. Role-play different types of pathways of communication. Learning Activities 2. Articulate and model effective communication techniques to the workforce. Learning Activities 3. Give personnel guidance about adapting communication strategies to suit a range of contexts. Introduction. This unit involves the provision of information to all areas of the organization to facilitate the implementation of the strategy, articulating effective communication techniques and guiding personnel to adapt communication strategies to suit in a range of contexts. Definition of key terms. Communication strategy. This is a plan of achieving the predetermined communication objectives. Effective communication. This is communication where both parties, i.e. the sender and the receiver, assign similar meanings to the intended message. Provision of information to facilitate implementation of the strategy. Communication strategies are vital in the realization of communication objectives. Therefore, communication strategies must be developed, implemented, and evaluated for effective communication to take place. Before implementing the communication strategies, it is prudent for the organization to carry out 3 basic steps leading to strategic decision-making about strategy. This include getting the right information, making a good decision, implementing the decision. The information stage involves knowing the types of information needed for decision-making, finding the information, and transmission of the information to the decision-makers. The information required, needed for the decision-making process involves knowledge of the organization, knowledge of the scope of operations of the organization, and the competitors of the organization. However, gathering information alone is not enough. Infrastructure must be put in place to ensure that information reaches decision-makers. The decision-makers must regularly meet in order to narrow on important issues. It is good practice to identify alternative courses of action. This is very crucial for decision-making purposes. The implementation of a communication strategy should be planned in order to allow for appropriate resources to be secured. The following must be considered during the implementation phase. Adequate resources and facilitation must be provided to ensure full participation. All participating staff, employees must be trained and supervised. Need for exchange of common experience between organizations or experts. Setting of technical committees to guide the strategy implementation. Verification of data appropriate for the strategy. Obtaining feedback from stakeholders on the impact of the strategy. Periodical appraisal and adjustments of the strategy's needs and resources change. Getting information for strategic implementation. Look at both internal and external factors. Conduct a research on the implementation of the strategy. Getting primary data on implementation. Getting secondary data on implementation. Implementation of the strategy. It does not just refer to the application or installation of new strategies. Some old strategies that may need adjustments, reinforcement are also part of this activity. The basic activities in this stage include establishing the strategy objectives, formulation of policies to execute the strategy, allocation of resources, leading and controlling of the performance of tactics and activities in the various organizational levels. Sometimes planning activities have to be done for implementation. Factors that support implementation of a communication strategy. People. Availability of the right and enough people to carry out the implementation will ensure a successful implementation. Resources. Enough resources must be allocated to ensure a successful implementation. This involves both financial and non-financial resources. Organizational structure. The structure should be well outlined with clear lines of authority, defined responsibilities and hierarchy. Systems, i.e. tools, systems and capabilities in place to facilitate implementation. Culture, i.e. the organizational culture and the general atmosphere of the stakeholders. Causes of failure in communication strategy implementation. Inadequate understanding of the strategy due to inadequate communication. This could be due to lack of ownership by the implementers or having a strategy that is confusing. A disconnected strategy, i.e. when there is a disconnect in budgeting, employee incentives, and compensation, etc. Little attention to the strategy by the organizational management. Implementation process. The following steps are vital in ensuring successful implementation. I. Evaluation and communication of the strategy. This involves aligning the strategy with the initiatives, aligning the budget with the objectives and goals, clarifying and communicating goals, objectives and strategies to members of the organization. E. Developing an implementation structure. This step involves establishing a link between, among departments, formulating work plans and procedures for implementation, determining tasks and responsibilities of the managers, determining tasks and responsibilities of operation, assigning tasks to different departments, evaluating the staffing structure, communicating the details to the organization's members. E. Developing implementation support policies and programs. This stage involves establishing a monitoring and tracking system of performance, establishing a management system of performance, establishing of information and feedback, communicating the policies and programs to the organization's members. IV. Budgeting and allocation. This step involves allocation of resources, disbursement of resources, maintenance of a system of checks and balances. V. Discharging functions and activities. This involves continuous engagement of stakeholders, application of control measures, evaluation of performance at different levels, articulating and modeling effective communication techniques. Articulation and modeling communication techniques involve expressing an idea in an explicit and clear manner. It establishes a very strong base of developing the core organizational processes, structure, capabilities, management system, and workforce. The rationale for articulating and modeling communication techniques. I. To translate and communicate the techniques, strategies in the best form accepted by the stakeholders. E. To maximize the strengths and minimize weaknesses of an organization. To cover the purpose, scope, and strengths of the business. To establish a strong foundation for developing the workforce, capability, structure, and systems of the organization. Effective communication techniques. Listening, expression, taking criticism positively, avoiding arguments, understanding the audience, getting feedback. How to articulate and model communication techniques. I. Understand the strategy, technique. Be in a position to understand the rationale of the strategy. Understand the scope of the technique, i.e. activities it involves. Understanding the advantages of the organization in terms of maximizing its strength, minimizing the weakness and mitigating the challenges. Understanding the present techniques, strategy used by the organization. Understand the challenges and opportunities that the organization faces. Conceive the dynamic environment of the organization. E. Summarize the strategy, technique. Consolidate and distill the essence of the firm's strategy, technique into a form that is easy to be understood and communicated. Establish a readable and clear statement that communicates the organization's strategy, technique. Establish the strategy, technique narrative, which should be relatively brief. Define the strategy in the eye of executives beyond the current, present position. Note: articulation of a communication technique requires a clear understanding or rationale for the articulation, a deep understanding of the strategy of the organization, and the ability to summarize the strategy into capturing the organization's essence. Personnel is given guidance about adapting communication strategies to suit a range of contexts. Personnel is given guidance about adapting communication strategies to suit a range of contexts. It is important for the organization to recognize the importance of adopting communication strategies for every employee and every situation. Ways of addressing one employee-colleague situation at the workplace vary depending on the employee-colleague situation. Thus, by appreciating unique personalities, understanding the organizational culture, and learning different communication techniques, it creates a good working environment. However, in the workplace it improves performance. Guiding your personnel and adapting communication strategies require knowledge of the colleagues, employees of the organization during the interactions. It is easy to establish the do's and don'ts of the colleagues, employees. However, in some organizations, the don'ts are clearly stipulated. Choice of the channel, i.e., the channel of communication, is also key in guiding the employees and colleagues in an organization. The best communication technique to be used. This allows swift and non-resistance to communication techniques. Effective communication is very critical in the event of a change in organizations. Communication should be made regularly and clearly about the change. This should be done in a manner that is informative, user-friendly, relevant, and easy to access. Considerations when adapting a communication strategy: honest, timely, consistent, and accurate information about the strategy. Clear explanation of the plans, vision and expected benefits, and the progress of the strategy to be communicated. Issues and questions concerning the strategy must be addressed and captured well. Maximize participation in the adoption process by involving everybody. Encourage discussions and dialogues about the strategy. Ensure the strategy adapted addresses unforeseen issues. Ensure effective communication. When guiding the personnel on the organization's communication strategy, the organization manager needs to keep the message simple though with deep meaning. When the relevance of the strategy is established by the employees, adapting it will be easy and fast. Build behavior based on the organization and client's insights. Use the inspire, educate, and reinforce framework in mapping and delivering the strategy. Think broader than just guarding and stay with the employees, clients, and never disappear. Be real in matters pertaining to strategy. Conclusion: the lesson has covered skills to provide information to all areas of the organization in facilitating of implementation of communication strategies, articulating effective communication techniques, and guiding personnel to adopt communication strategies that suit a range of contexts. Further reading: Cornelison, J. 2014. Corporate Communication, A Guide to Theory and Practice. 4th edition. Sage Publications, Cowan, D. 2017. Strategic Internal Communication. How to Build Employee Engagement and Performance. Kogan Page Limited, 2nd ed. Thank you for watching and listening to this lesson. See you in the next lesson, Lesson 5. If this is your first time, remember to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications to receive alerts when new content is released.